All right, today's topic for conversation is MagneRide. MagneRide is relatively new for Mustang. It's been a thing since the GT350 came out in 2016. Optional on other trim levels since 2018 and continues into the S650 generation. The idea of MagneRide, or the MagneReological shocks, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, has been around for much longer than it has been in Mustang. In all honesty, it's gotten cheap enough to be available in Mustang, but in super high performance, supercars and high-end luxury cars, the idea of MagneRide has been around much longer. With that said, I wanted to do a quick video on whether or not you should get MagneRide for your vehicle. I've had a lot of people reach out to me over the years since MagneRide has become a thing with Mustang on whether or not they should spend the extra money to get that MagneRide as an option. And it really does boil down to exactly what you intend to do with the vehicle. But before we dive into that, I think we should talk about exactly what MagneRide is. That way you can have a basic understanding of what you'd be paying for. And then from there, we'll dive into the types of people that would get MagneRide or that would opt from not getting it. So what is MagneRide? MagneRide is exactly what I said earlier, MagneReological shocks, but every damper, every shock on every vehicle is filled with fluid, right? Different types of fluid at different pressures, all depending on how the damping works in the vehicle. I'm sure Engineering Explained has a very, very in-depth video on how shocks work and all that good stuff. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to try to explain it. But essentially, the MagneRide cars are filled with this fluid, but the fluid actually has little tiny metal particles inside the fluid. And it has a computer with the sensors on each corner of the car reading the control arms and how much they're moving up and down and all the different inputs from the vehicle. And this computer is sending a charge through the fluid to magnetize those little metal particles, which changes the viscosity of the fluid. So exactly what that means is if you put a charge through the fluid, it will in turn make the fluid have a higher viscosity, much stiffer or looser for, jounce and rebound. So all that to say is essentially MagneRide is active suspension versus a conventional shock and strut setup. You are going to have set parameters of what that shock is able to do in any situation. But the cool thing about MagneRide is it allows you to have a nice cushy ride going down the highway like I'm doing right now, or I put it in track mode, it gets quite a bit stiffer, and I could have a performance setting for my shocks when I'm pushing it on track or in an autocross. So that is the basic overview of what MagneRide is. It's pretty cool, it's pretty advanced, there's a lot of technology in it, and to be available for an EcoBoost Mustang, entry-level EcoBoost Mustang with the performance package, all the way up to, GT500 and Dark Horse. It is really awesome to have the option to spec your car out with that kind of technology, right? So let's talk about what cars MagneRide is available on. It was first offered in 2016 for the GT350. That was the first car. And then fast forward to 2018, you can get on the GT with the performance package. And then if you had the performance package, MagneRide was an option from there. I want to say at that time it was probably around $1,499, $1,500, something along those lines. And then I think a couple years later, they added it to EcoBoost. If you had the performance package on EcoBoost, you could get MagneRide as an option. And then in 2020, they offered the high performance package EcoBoost, which had it built into that specific package. So it wasn't an option, it came with that high performance package. In addition to that, GT Performance Package 2 also had MagneRide built in with those super wide front and rear, rear tires with a 19 by 10.5 up front, 19 by 11 in the rear with Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires. And the Bullet had MagneRide as an option, as well as the Mach 1 had MagneRide built in. For S650, it's pretty much the same. If you get the EcoBoost performance package, you can have MagneRide as an option. You get the GT performance package, you can have MagneRide as an option. Automatic or manual, doesn't matter. And then Dark Horse has MagneRide standard. So it's safe to say that Ford is pushing to put MagneRide on more vehicles more often, and that's frankly because of the multi-purpose, multi-use that MagneRide offers the customer. I mean, you could have a particular customer that, you know, opts for MagneRide on their car and they never really use the track parts of it, but it is going to be cushier than a non-MagneRide car going down the highway. So it kind of goes either way. Diving into the types of people and the types of customers and what you do with your car, we will start with who doesn't want MagneRide. If you're the kind of person that just goes to a Cars and Coffee, you're cruising down the street, the occasional back road, you have a good time, but you pop your hood at car shows, you really don't do anything performance oriented with your Mustang. I know I'm quite the opposite, but obviously there are Mustang owners out there that are like that, and that's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. To be honest, I don't think you would benefit that much from putting MagneRide on your vehicle. It's an extra option, it's an extra expense, and obviously when the time comes that you need to replace your shocks, it's going to be that much more expensive to put the, you know, fancy MagneRide shocks back on your car. Because as with any shock, it is a wear item, just like pads and rotors and clutches and other things like that. It will need to be replaced at some point. You know, you may plan to lower it, but you really don't do anything performance oriented, so you're probably just going to put lowering springs on and maybe camber bolts, potentially camber plates, and no aftermarket shocks or struts. Just run your factory shocks. That's totally fine, but I don't think MagneRide is a good way to spend your money, honestly. Now, on the flip side, if you were the kind of person that is trying to get every millisecond possible out of your Mustang, then MagneRide probably isn't for you either. Think of MagneRide as something that is great at doing everything, right? I don't want to say jack of all trades, a master of none, but it's kind of along those same lines. If you're going to the road course and you are going for every 10th you possibly can, then you're going to want to add a set of coilovers on there. Have dedicated track springs, a dedicated track setup. You're not going to care how the car rides on the street. You're barely going to drive it on the street. It's for track use. Same goes for drag strip. You're all about getting that power to the ground, and you really don't cruise much on the street. You are, you know, a twin turbo car, or you know, crazy Whipple E85, you know, 1,000 plus, 800, 900 plus horsepower. It's a cruiser on the street. You're not really concerned with, you know, how well the car drives or how comfortable it is. It's all about getting down the quarter mile. And same thing with autocross. You have a dedicated autocross setup, similar to road course, you're not really going to care. So those are the two types of people that probably won't want to opt out of getting MagneRide for the car. And sometimes it's unavoidable if you're limited to what's on the dealer lot, or you're picking up the car used, you really don't have the option. But if you're buying the car new, personally, if I fit either of those profiles, I probably would opt out of getting it. Now, MagneRide equipped cars. Who should get MagneRide for their car? Personally, I feel like most people fit, you know, everything's a bell curve, right? When you're looking at groups of people. And I feel like the majority of the bell curve fits in the probably should get MagneRide, or at least try it out, right? The one caveat to doing this, the one caveat to optioning out your car, I kind of already mentioned it, is if you intend to keep your Mustang for a long time, I am not one of those people. I go through Mustangs like I go through underwear. It's kind of an addiction, but it's okay. You're gonna have to replace these shocks at some point. And if you're looking to replace your shocks down the road, you plan to keep the car 50, 80, 100,000 miles, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you're probably going to want to keep that in consideration of, at some point, you're gonna have to replace these things, and it's gonna be a couple $1,000s. You know, that's just the fact of the matter of getting a higher technology shock, right? Now, once you get past that, you'll be able to determine whether or not it's a good shock for you. I like MagneRide. I'm a big fan of it. If you can get past the maintenance point, I'm a big fan of MagneRide because it does everything pretty darn well. It allows you to do what I'm doing this weekend, a 6-hour trip from Charlotte back down to Georgia, and I am extremely comfortable. Even with the Recaros and everything else, this car isn't beating me up. It is very, very comfortable. But I've raced this car in autocross, and I put the car in track mode, and it was stiff, much stiffer than the S550s were in racing those, even those with MagneRide. But the same kind of deal with, you know, EcoBoost or GT for the S550 cars. You're going to be able to do everything pretty darn well. Another thing to keep in mind when you are opting for MagneRide is that spring options, lowering spring options, are much smaller. There is an aftermarket there. Pretty much all the main suppliers do make lowering springs specific for MagneRide, but one thing to keep in mind is that you can't buy lowering springs for a non-MagneRide car and put them on a MagneRide car. The rear springs are different on either side, and you won't be able to do that. So just one thing to keep in mind, that your aftermarket lowering spring options will be a little bit more limited, but that's a small side effect. My favorite part about MagneRide is the multi-use of it. You can really do a little bit of everything. When you do switch the driving modes on your car, on your Mustang, it's doing more things, right? Like, if you didn't have MagneRide, it wouldn't be changing the damping of the car. It is what it is. It's static. But if you do have MagneRide and you're going down a back road, and you're doing tail the dragon or something along those lines, and you put the car in normal mode, and it's kind of floaty, a little bit all over the place, then you pop it in sport mode and it haunches down, and you can feel the difference in the damping just on a curvy back road. Then you go to your local autocross or go to your local track and put it in track mode, and everything really stiffens up. So it allows you to do everything pretty darn well. And you factor in a great, if you're a road course guy or if you're a handling guy like me, you factor in a great spring that complements MagneRide, like Steeda's MagneRide dual rate springs, and it brings it to the next level, because those springs specifically are tuned for MagneRide, and you'll be able to get even stiffer, keep the car more planted as you're going around corners without as much roll because of the stiffer spring rates on those secondary rate, but you can even take it to the next level. And when it comes to MagneRide, obviously, there are differing opinions. If you are a drag strip car, you are the kind of person that does take your car to the drag strip occasionally, and let's say you're the weekend warrior when it comes to, going to the drag strip and having a good time, I think you can go either way. There are shocks out there, shock and spring combinations that allow you to do what you need to do on the drag strip. They aren't crazy coilovers or anything like that, but there's drag spring setups that allow you to get that weight transfer. So you can go either way if you're a weekend warrior, drag racer kind of person. Just get the non-MagneRide performance pack or non-MagneRide base GT or base EcoBoost, and get the proper spring setup and shock setup that allows you to transfer that weight to the rear. And that'll help you at the drag strip. But if you do have MagneRide and you are the weekend warrior drag racer, that's fine too. There are springs out there that help complement that weight transfer even with the MagneRide, and the MagneRide's even going to help you a little bit with the settings it has for drag strip mode, where you can where it will stiffen up the rear for that weight transfer and loosen up the front to help get that weight towards the rear of the car and get more planted off the line. So to sum things up, it really does boil down to what you're looking for out of the car. Personally, I am a big MagneRide fan. I love technology, and the fact that you can change how the car handles certain situations with the push of a button is really, really cool, especially for a Mustang, which is, the everyday muscle car. It's not a Porsche. It's not a high-end Audi or BMW. It is the everyday muscle car. And to have this kind of technology available to even an entry-level EcoBoost with a performance package, which is especially the S650, which is a very impressive car from a handling standpoint, given its more even weight distribution and the lighter engine up front, there's a lot of potential and opportunity there. So I believe on the S650s, I want to say now it's an $1,800 option, thanks to inflation. But in the grand scheme of things, these are all things to consider when you're looking to spec out your Mustang and figure out which option combination is best for you. If you have any questions, please comment below and let me know. I'll do my best to answer all of them, and if they warrant a new video, I'd be more than happy to put something together. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and please the notification bell so you know when something's coming down the pipeline, and we'll see you next time.